Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis, and we have as our guest this evening the City Councilor from Ward 3, Stacy Ames. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you. Thank you, George and Elliot. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be on your show and to be able to talk to you about all things Beverly and just generally all things.
Well, how does the fish story fit into all things Beverly?
Yeah, so I wanted to start talking about the fish. We're actually sitting in my work office, which is kind of neat that you get to see all these different places. So this fish back here actually belonged to my dear friend, Alice Brock. So this is for Thanksgiving. And Alice Brock is the Alice from Alice's Restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
As in, you can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. And I don't know if this will show up that way.
Yep. Yeah.
But there is a picture of Alice with the fish.
Oh, yeah.
In the background, right? Yeah. And so the fish used to sit on one little nail over her bed in her house on Commercial Street in Provincetown.
Oh, wow.
So as we're heading towards Thanksgiving, and we know that Alice's Restaurant is our perennial Thanksgiving song, I just thought I would make that mention. She is just a wonderful, thoughtful, awesome cook and great person.
Yeah. Super. Well, anyway, what we really wanted to get into, I guess, and we've been doing a series with the city councilors and a couple of Beverly citizens of where do you think the city is? Where do you think it's going? Where would you like to see it go? And there's a lot of stuff happening in town, and there's a lot of buzz for and against and with and questions. So from your perspective, where do you think the city is right now?
The city, I think, is in amazingly good shape, considering everything that has happened sort of externally to the economy and regarding this pandemic and even regarding this election this year. So I think in terms of the city finances have been able to be maintained. You know, when we built the budget in June, it was based on a 17.5% assumed reduction in local aid, which is more than $3 million. Well, we don't know what will happen next year. Local aid has been fully funded this year on top of $3.7 million of federal money that came to help the city with COVID this year. So that means that education was level funded, maybe a little slight increase. The city side, you know, the question is now, what are we going to do with the extra $3 to $3.5 million in local aid that wasn't accounted for? And I'm not exactly sure. We've had some initial conversations with the mayor, but I think that as we head towards setting the tax rate is going to be the next round of conversations. So in terms of, the city government is doing well. I think the school system has done a pretty darn good job with all the change. I would not want to be in their shoes. I think their challenges are enormous. In terms of the rest of us, the people who live here, I think it's been and work here, it's been a crazy, difficult, challenging year. And so I believe personally that the most important thing we need to do is to take care of each other in every way we can.
Let me ask you this, Stacy. Since the city is financially in pretty good shape, we have a mayor who doesn't take any opportunities not to increase taxes. But we also have a lot of people in the city who are unemployed now because of COVID. is there a chance maybe that we could not have any tax increases this year for the people in the city that own homes?
Part of what I've learned it's beyond the people who owned homes, because it's all the property owners. Even if you're renting, those tax increases get passed on to the people who rent.
Well, basically,
right? It's like,
tax,
for the people who live here. Or if you own a business, those tax increases get passed on to the people who own businesses. I'm sitting here in my office in Salem, right, in a 7,500 square foot commercial condo. And yeah, my taxes go up here as well. And so I'm not sure if you recall, but back in June, I proposed $1.3 million worth of tax cuts out of that budget based on the 17.5% reduction in local aid. And I even went as far as not voting for the budget because I thought it was unfair for many of the reasons that you listed. And I've got to wait to see what the administration brings forth. But I have had conversations with other counselors and with the mayor one-on-one, saying that I would hope that I don't think it's going to be possible to not have any tax increase, but I believe it would be very important, unless there's something I don't understand, to try to reduce that tax increase, just for the reasons pretty much you explained, that people are hurting, and to have a sense of parity.
Right.
We want parity, and while I think it's very easy to say that every barrel has been removed from the city, that the library is not open, that the senior center is not open, but that is not the whole story. The library is still working. The senior center is working extra hard to take care of seniors in this city. And there are other places, in the police department and elsewhere, fire department, where they have to do extra things. The school department often to take care of people in these situations. But yeah, I would love to see more rent relief. I would like to see lower taxes. I would, any way to keep people in their homes, to keep people fed, healthy, and feeling safe in this environment is my number one top priority in this economy.
We have tax classification in the city, which I think is a really horrible thing, but we're charging businesses 175% of the tax rate. A lot of businesses are closed. Restaurants can't even get people into the restaurants now, and yet they still have to pay their taxes. And there should be some consideration for the business community, because the business community hires people from Beverly. And if their expenses are so high, they got to cut the employees down.
Well, we've seen it from lots of different organizations. The latest one is Massport just laid off 25% of their workforce. The hotels in Boston are taking 50% cuts in labor. And yeah, we're in a much more comfortable position here in Beverly, but we're not that good. And I think the simple answer is, if you can level load the budget, then you should be able to level load the taxes. And I think it comes down to something as simple as that. And I think we need a much better explanation than we've been getting as to why we have to max out the taxes every year. This is a time when got to do something different. These times are different. But anyway, aside from the money involved, what else do you think about the city? Is Ward 3 getting involved in a lot of this building, or is that in the cards for your area?
In terms of the building, that is not what I've personally been focusing on. I've been digging into community. One of the things that I've been bringing different residents and organizations together around is the planning department in City Hall. There's a crowd-funded grant program through the state to revitalize parks. And so I would like to put in an application with different groups and people and individuals to work on Gage Street Playground and Holcroft Park. That's a neighborhood that doesn't have, that very often people don't have have backyards, access to outside space. And I think that we all know how important the parks have become. And I think that to repurpose that or to revitalize that and give it more purpose, whether, the summer parks programs for the kids, to make that really vibrant, after school programs, perhaps, a basketball league, I don't care, Sunday afternoon picnics in the parks. In the park, it's a beautiful place. And to be able to, without hitting the city budget, have the community really bring purpose to that open space, I think could be a great thing.
Well, one of the things we're trying to do is get a lot of opinions about what ought to happen in the city. And you raised an interesting point that there is an organization or a group of people in your ward who are actively involved in improving the quality of the situation. So would you think any one of them would be willing to come on our show and give their opinion?
Perhaps I can reach out to them. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because one of the things we want to do is get a really diverse opinion. And the city councilors have one set of operating procedures and goals. And I think we want to make sure that they're really representing the people they say they're representing. And as Elliot brought up the question of, what about the tax rate? To blandly say we're going to just raise it to full 2.5% plus new growth in a year like this doesn't sound like it's very representative.
I think, there are huge conversations to be had about the budget, and I don't want to make this all about money all the time, but I often talk to the administration about a revenue plan, because I think, your questions or your points about who should be paying what taxes when, are really important. And I think what's been going on recently is at the level of residential, the residential tax rate part of the revenue plan has been slowly increasing, and the commercial has been coming down. The percentage of commercial units or square footage has been coming down, and that's for a lot of reasons. But I personally believe that we want to have as much commerce here as possible, because I think that takes a massive load, not only off of the existing businesses, because it spreads, that development can spread the tax burden, but it also takes a significant weight off of the homeowners' shoulders. Because as you know, I have so many homeowners in Ward 3 who always tell me I'm going to get priced out of this community. And that's not what we want to have. And so I think we need as a city to have a conscious plan. It all doesn't always work out, for sure, but goals to try to to grow the economy in a way that will have less impact, especially on the residents.
When you made a comment, let me continue with it. You made a comment that there's a shifting percentage of the taxes between residential and business, and yet we look at the city and Cummings Center is growing, and I don't know whether they're completely tapped out as far as space goes. Um, Dunham Road is expanding, Cherry Hill, and there's some talk about adding something to a few other areas like Folly Hill. Um, I don't understand what you mean by the shifting burden. Is there less manufacturing, less businesses?
Yes, there is. And I think when we take, like if you look at Park Street, if you take a neighborhood that's been traditionally commercial, and if you change that to become more residential, then there is a tax impact right there because the tax rate changes for
Well,
that.
what's happening in Park Street or Rantoul Street is, you're getting out of a manufacturing situation into one of a commercial condo or a commercial apartment
But
building.
there are also residents. There's a lot of pressure for the transit-oriented development. There's a lot of pressure for just more residential. And honestly, and I don't know how you fellas feel about it, but the voters have spoken, and we're why we don't have a dispensary here in town, because that's a great way for us to generate some revenue, and they're all around us. And I think, in these times, I think that that's a solid option for us moving forward. And I just think I think it's just smart sense to be thinking forwardly about all the options that we have here and who we want to be, and whether it's how walkable the city is, or what do our parks look like, or where our revenue comes from. All this is tied together. Even if it runs to how this year we're going to renegotiate all the trash contracts and the recycling contracts, and the whole landscape has changed. I've spent some time with the Solid Waste Reduction Committee because of China's no longer taking our recycling. It's arguably more expensive to recycle a ton of waste than it is than just to dispose of it. And thinking about composting, thinking about removing as much fabric, textiles out of, which are both really heavy, out of the waste stream, is going to have an impact and a revenue shift. So I think it's just all these ways to just try to think about constant improvement and how we as a community can just do whatever we're doing better.
Well, just out of curiosity, are all the apartments that are being built on Rantoul Street, are they considered residential or commercial? Because the owner of the building...
That's one of the questions I've been having. My gut tells me they're residential, but please do not quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure.
Nobody's going to quote you on it. I mean, who's watching TV, right? But no, the point being, when you brought up that there's fewer commercial square footage now, there's a reason for that. And the reason is the tax classification. Up at Folly Hill, the Beverly side of Folly Hill was the last to get filled because in Danvers, the taxes were less. So there's a causal link between commercial and the cost of being in the city of Beverly.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
And then we have all these apartments, which, by the way, will have children at some point.
Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't think
that could increase the school situation, and that's right, and that's part of the reason why. And that's part of the reason why, Elliot, I think that protecting commerce and increasing commerce and having a plan for commerce is so important. And it's important that these voices, the voices of the Cummings Center is in Ward 3, and I check in with them regularly. I mean, I think George's point that you need to
people need to be heard is so important. Now, on the weekend, I've been taking at least one, I call them ward walks. And so I'll walk through a neighborhood, generally with my little dog, and just, even if I don't talk to anyone, I'll try to say, okay, this is where I'm going. And if somebody wants to contact me and say, take a walk through my neighborhood with me, then I'm happy to do it. I want to see what the roads and sidewalks look like. I want to see how the homeowners are doing. I want them to see me. I want, I serve. It's an honor, an absolute honor and privilege to serve the just over 8,000 people in Ward 3. I serve them.
Well, one of the questions that I keep liking to ask is, what do you think is the character of the city? This is something Tim Flaherty raised when we talked with him. And the question comes down to, where are we now? What is the character of the city? And where do we think it ought to go in light of, like you said, the pressure from TOD, this transportation-oriented development around the train stations?
What could you please for me define character?
I don't know what it is. That's what I'm asking you.
Okay,
If you look at the city right now, there's a whole bunch of condos that have been built on the south end of Rantoul Street. They used to be mills. Beverly used to be a mill city. The shoe was in the business of making the machines that went to Lynn to make the shoes, and Peabody tanned the leather. We all understand that that was the character, the history of the city. And we got into a big brouhaha over Depot 2, over the question of the character of the city was focused on the railroad station and the fact that there was a hotel right there, so people could step off the train and step into the lobby of the hotel. And yeah, that was 50, 100, more than 50, it's 100, 150 years ago. Now, what is the character of the city? Is it really going to become another Somerville or Cambridge of collection of dinks from Boston who can't afford to live there? Dinks, by the way, is dual income, no kids, the ones that Elliott doesn't believe in.
I don't know. I think because I represent where I represent, I literally, like earlier this fall, I brought the planner and the assistant planner over to Holcroft Park. I spend a lot of time trying to encourage anyone who will listen to maintain a large swath of first-time homebuyer homes, affordable apartments, places where young working class people can live. Because I hear from so many people that they're getting priced out. I hear from people who are older. They want to stay in Beverly and they can't. I listened to the planning board meeting this week, talking about Plan Beverly, because there's a lot of talk in there. I think and this could be controversial, but my opinion, just about one of my basic opinions about life, is that there's change. There just is change. And so how do we manage it? And I happen to be a woman who strongly believes that it's okay to break things that aren't working for us and to try to rebuild them. One of the most heartwarming things I've learned this year, even just talking to the Waste Reduction Committee, is the volunteers on boards and commissions, the volunteers who support the parks, who support each other in different ways, the people who feed the hungry across the city, the people who care about each other in this city are amazing. And they are open-minded and they want to do better every day. So I'm not saying, I think pre-COVID, there was not going to be 2 cars in every driveway 10 years from now. I think that I look at my neighbors upstairs from me, a young couple, and they have 1 car. And it's an old battle truck, and they Uber. Their concept of transportation is different than mine. And I think that we were well on our way to sort of a generational paradigm change. And now, because public transportation can be dangerous, we're in a tough spot. And let's be honest, I read on the front page of the Salem News, the T is contemplating closing the train station at Beverly at Pride's Crossing in Ward 6. I mean, how many people are commuting to Boston? How many people go to an office? And the world is changing. And that's why you say, what is our character? Last year, I could have told you where I thought we were going. This year, I think it's more important than ever that we take care of each other, because everything that most of what I thought and I believed in and I thought to be true, and the trends I thought, so many have been undone. It's a crazy time.
If you look at downtown Salem, they are building a fairly large hotel.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I once mentioned to Mayor Scanlon, Beverly is the place you drive through to go from Salem to Gloucester. Beverly has an opportunity to bring tourism to it. And we have failed miserably to bring tourism. If we have tourism, we have hotels, we have more restaurants, we have the commercial property you're looking for. We are the birthplace of the American Navy, and nobody knows it.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to care.
That's a conversation now, isn't it, though, Elliot? Isn't that a conversation to have? I live a football field from downtown. And there is nothing like being able to walk downtown to whatever watering hole, coffee shop you want, be able to walk in, sit down, have a cup of coffee with a friend, pre-COVID, or sit outside and not have the throngs. I mean, it goes back to George's question about character. Who do we want to be? I mean, who do we want to be? Arguably, that's a piece of our charm. I think that many people would say that we need exactly what you're talking about for growth, that we need not to be a bedroom community, that we need to have that economic driver. And, as a ward counselor, I don't think it's my job to sit on high and say on so many issues and say, this is who we're going to become. I think that those are the community conversations, and those are the places too, when you talk about a revenue plan, who do we, when you do this, then that happens.
Well, I think
when you build, what about parking downtown? What about, what do you do with, everything is connected.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we've run into the situation that we're going to be disconnected pretty soon, because we're running out of time and we're used up by 30 minutes. And obviously this discussion has room to grow and continue. So would like to do this again sometime when you're available, Stacy. Come back and continue where we're going. And my concern, I think, is when we start talking about affordable housing, you've got to have a good job. And the tourism industry doesn't pay it. And I lean more towards, what are we going to do about Folly Hill? What are we going to do about Dunham Road? These are the areas that I think that discussion ought to be made. And do we really want to convert Park Street into another bunch of condos?
That's a big question. I mean, look at and do not forget, in the Cummings Center, there are so many life science businesses. There are more life science environmental businesses in the Cummings Center than there are in Cambridge and Boston, or there were last year. And I think that, those are the businesses, those are the jobs that I believe too are going to define us.
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. And like I said, we've run out of time again. And like all good discussions, there's more to be said, and we want to do some more. Thank you for joining us, Stacy, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Have fun.